Hey, you are listening to Abyss Gazing, a horror podcast where we celebrate all things spooky and mental health.
I'm still here, and my name's Mark, your co-host.
And I'll probably replace him soon. My name's Billy, your other co-host.
Quit lying. You ain't replacing nothing.
My name is Josh, and I am the third co-host. And if Mark disappears one day, Billy's here.
I got
What
you,
the hell?
Josh.
They're going to make everybody think I'm leaving.
I mean, I feel like you got to be like, in order to qualify as a co-host of this podcast, you also have to live in Virginia now. So, them the rules.
Lies. All lies.
You're out in the country. Do you got the right internet for out there?
Dude, I've got 1 gig fiber. I probably have better internet than both of you.
Yeah. Well, we are almost done our Omen series.
Well, this will end the Omen. No, it won't.
Nope,
I forgot.
because we have the prequel series, the first Omen last week, which you guys can check out my spoiler-free review over on our YouTube. We are one step closer to finishing our Omen series with the 2006 remake. Had either one of you guys seen this movie before today's recording?
Yes, I actually had free preview tickets and saw it like 2 or 3 weeks before it was released in the theaters.
I didn't realize I had until I started watching it and remembered like most of the movie.
I actually
That's
found
how
that
I'm
out.
right.
I actually found that out about almost the entire Omen series, except the original. I'd start watching. It was like, I guess I had seen this.
Yeah, that's the way I was. It was like, wait a minute. Oh, they were in this? Oh, it was the Omen? Oh, I forgot this movie. I forgot I watched it.
Cool. Well, this was a first time watch for me. I do remember the marketing behind this movie because this movie got released on June 6th, 2006, and like their entire marketing for it was 666.
Yeah.
Which man,
kind of dumb.
It's so dumb. And this movie is like uses that as like such a heavy-handed overkill. Like, yeah.
They kind of took little pieces of 2 and mixed it in with the original and made a couple story tweaks to make it a little bit more coherent.
A little bit. Like I can definitely like see that. I think like my thing is like I just felt like so like we didn't talk about this in the last episode, but like did either one of you guys feel like in part 4 like they just had such a heavy emphasis on like the upside down cross?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, they made sure to focus in on a fence that was upside down that looked like a cross. So
Yeah.
and the mirror had an upside down cross. I mean,
I've been part of the metal and goth scene for decades and have seen less upside down crosses than they had in Omen 4.
Yeah, and it felt like they took that moniker and just hit like, like we've done the upside down cross thing. What if we did the mark of the beast and we just put 666 in this movie as much as possible?
Yeah.
I mean, you even have what a freaking senator that dies at he dies at like 6 o'clock in the afternoon. That's 6 minutes after 6 seconds. Like I was like, come on, man, like you're trying too freaking hard at this point.
Yeah.
I mean, and they emphasized that. Just they zoomed in on the clock, made sure or the watch or whatever, made sure you saw that. I'm like, okay, yeah, that's right. They're gonna focus 666 the whole movie.
Yeah.
Like I wish I had the DVD cover with me because like in the O, like there's like in the corner of it, like there's just this like little like 666 like monogram, and I'm like, man, like I feel like this is trying too hard. See, like when you go back and you watch the original Omen, like I think what catches it off guard is like the fact that it feels like it's kind of sketchy in the beginning, but then like as the movie kind of goes on, there's some weird things happening. And then you have that whole like Damien is the son of the devil like plot that's introduced. Like it's not up front and in your face like it is with this one.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Mark.
they kind of had Damien a little more involved in the story than in the original. So you can see more of the fact that he's a little shit. Like when they show him sitting there staring at the guard, freaking out the guard at one point, so somebody else can get killed. Things like that. He's like involved with the murders at like 10 or 7 or whatever the hell he is.
I think in the original one, I think he's only 5. I think the birthday party is the 5th one. And I think for this one he's also 5, but I'm like honestly kind of low-key surprised that they didn't make him 6 in this one.
Right. Well, I mean, he looks a lot older than 5.
But
I think
Go
the
ahead.
first one tried to do 5 to ease him into that next year was making him into his 6th birthday of him being Damien on the original. But I may have read into that.
That's fair. I also think that, like, Mark, to your point, the reason that I think the first film works as well as it does is because they actually give Damien stuff to do. Whereas when you watch this film, like I was really bored by the child performance, and like I already like don't like children, so like you got to give me a reason to like actually like want to like either fear or like not like this kid. And the kid,
they made him so you didn't like him.
Like this kid in this movie, the remake, he just looked like someone just took his lollipop and like, you know, walked away. And I'm just like, you got to give him something to do. Like this doesn't feel like the Antichrist or the son of the devil. Like it doesn't feel like evil incarnate whatsoever.
I mean, you said lollipop. I'm thinking of the scene where he was making the sandwich and the look he gave is like, don't steal my PB&J. I mean, come on.
Have you ever taken a little kid's lollipop because they were being a dick?
Yes. Remember, I have 4 sons, so yes.
They give you some mean looks. They can be evil little bastards sometimes.
Can I just like address like a huge plot hole in this movie?
That I'm like that it exists.
There and like yes, but also like there are tons of plot holes in this movie. But this one I think bothered me the most is like so the whole idea of like, you know, Christianity and like, you know, faith in period is that you're supposed to like uphold like, at least for being a Christian, like I can't speak to Catholics, but like the idea of being a Christian is that you're supposed to like be like in the world but not be of the world, so like you're supposed to be like essentially like righteous and stuff like that. Just kind of boiling it down. But this is the thing that bothered me, is that like if Father Brennan was actually at Damien's birth and knew of the 666 birthmark, why did he let 5 years go by before telling anyone?
Well, he did the same thing in the first one.
It's still
in the original.
Okay. To Josh's point of why did they, you know,
because it was in the original. That's why.
Not a valid argument.
It's not. It's not. And like, and I'm gonna say something that like maybe like is taking a page out of Mark's book and like pissing off some people, but you know, after stories that like, you know, Spotlight from, you know, the early 2000s comes out and shows that like Catholics regularly have a practice of, instead of convicting sex offenders, simply move from one parish to another and repeat the process over again. It feels like this is almost kind of the same exact thing. Like, you need to do good, but instead you do evil because if you if you did the good, it would bring back the death of a child, which God forbid that happens, especially if it is the Antichrist. And two, it says it very explicitly in the Bible that like if you know something is uh bad and you do it anyways, it's a sin. Like if you know that there's something that needs to be good that needs to be done and you do not do it, you turn the other cheek, then you have sinned.
But how are they supposed to keep the church in business without making sure sin is in?
A church is not like the Bible. It's never supposed to be a business. That's the thing that like bothers me most about like the current structure or the viewpoint of like why we have. It's not supposed to be like Jesus flipped over tables in the temple for the very reason of the thing that you're saying.
Well, but I'm not wrong. That's the problem.
You're not, and it bothers the shit out of me.
Well, just building on that is like I can tell you the most important thing now is getting bulletins out because of their printers.
Oh, God.
That's the biggest phone call we get. We can't print our bulletins. Sometimes I feel like asking them, can't you just chisel it in stone?
I could, because me and Billy helped kind of train me when I got into the same, because we're in the same field. I can tell you the two worst customers is lawyers' offices and churches. Because churches want you to do more than they pay for, and they want it right now as cheaply as humanly possible. And they're assholes about it.
Which again goes back to my original point. There is an actual scripture that says pay people their worth.
Right.
And to have that, and then also like my sister was a server for years, hated working Sunday mornings because she would always get the Baptist crowd that would always say, let's pray for you, or here's a tract. I can't pay my bills with a tract. Just throwing that out there.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say there's a lot of talk, but not a lot of action in a lot of cases. Or it looks good on Sunday, but not during the week.
And maybe that's an entirely other podcast.
Yeah.
I covered this movie a couple weeks ago, Immaculate. Go see it. If you're hearing that it's blasphemous and all that other, I'm here as a Christian to tell you to go see it because it is freaking phenomenal. But it is very layered in terms of like how the church views people sometimes, especially women. And
is it actually good?
It is very good.
Okay.
It's very good. But Mark, to your point, yeah, it's part of the reason that I, as a Christian, have a lot of problems with organized religion currently because of how people kind of just pick and choose the scriptures that they want to follow.
It goes back. I've been asked why, because I grew up in the church, in a Southern Baptist, and I don't like going to churches because it's very two-faced. The people are very, from my experience, they put on a good show on Sundays, and then during the week you couldn't tell them from anybody else, or you constantly hear them talk about, did you see this person? Did you see what they were wearing? Did you hear what? And it was just constant.
Gossip.
So yeah, between that and their actual behavior themselves.
Also, something else that the scriptures to tell not to do.
So why would I want to go be around that when I can have much more peace and quiet at home and not have to deal with it?
Yeah, and some of it, like, first off, I'm sorry that you deal with hypocrites, because that's not cool. But some of it also comes down to the fact that like it is is just either A, being around the right people, or B, being around people that actually practice what they preach, which unfortunately can sometimes be rare, and it makes finding a congregation in order to be a part of even that much harder. They're out there. I'm living proof of that. That's not cocky. That's just being vulnerable. So
while Billy's sitting there with Skullman behind him.
Yeah, which again, while we're on the subject, we just want to get out like the plot holes in this movie.
Well, I mean, I was going to bring up something else that's
Go for
like
it, Billy.
big. At the beginning, whenever they're first explaining everything, and they show the videos of all the tragedies happening, and in this one, it's just 9/11. I mean, I'm wondering how hard that hit because that was so close to when it happened.
It wasn't even 4 years. Oh, it was a little over 4 years, almost 5 years when this movie came out. And watching that this morning, I was like, why? Why?
Yeah, I mean, at the time, everybody was trying to avoid it, and
Too
this
soon?
movie kind of like threw it in your face.
Too soon. Too soon.
Yes, Mark. Yes,
Yeah.
it is. It is way too soon to make that happen. Like I thought that was probably one of the boldest moves I've seen in film. For as much as I kind of am on the fence about this movie, I will say that they got cojones to put something like that in this movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it probably hit harder then than it does now. I mean, because there have been so many years separated to go back and watch it and be like, okay. But at that time, everybody was still heightened and everything else. It just happening.
Like I don't really remember culture specifically around that time. So like I can't really speak to like where we were as like a society in remembrance of that time, but I know like specific like there were like huge sects of people, whether you're talking about firefighters, military, people in New York, that even to this day, 20 years plus removed, is like still a very touchy subject. And even the imagery of that, can still trigger.
Yeah, trigger.
Weren't you like 5 when that happened or something like that?
No, I was like
10.
I was 10. I was 10, man. I don't want to make you guys feel old, but yeah, I was 10.
Man.
Are we going to have to rename the show 2 Men and a Youngin'?
No, it's going to be abyss gazing until the day we decide we don't want to do this anymore.
It's not 2 1/3 men.
We can
I mean, he is just a little guy.
Yes. Let's jump back into plot holes.
Well, I was going to jump back to comparisons. What do y'all think about the fact that this one tried to use jump scares more than the other one did?
I think it goes back. Go ahead, Mark.
I think that's common to American horror and has been since like the 90s.
It's a product of its time,
right?
More than anything else.
I thought it was odd that there was a random stained glass window hanging out of the church for the pole to go through. So not only did he get skewered, he got cut up by random glass. That made no sense to me. Out of all the plot holes, that's the one that got me.
What?
It's
not
like,
even.
Why was the window there?
Well, what about the guy with his head chopped off? They happened to be on the roof and kick something to break something that, to me, it would have taken more to break.
I mean, I can deal
Look,
that there was no point for this window to be hanging out in the middle of nowhere.
Look, say what you will about anything else in this movie. David Thewlis losing his head is arguably the best part in this movie. At least death wise.
That's one of the best.
That's fantastic.
That's one of the best decapitations in a movie.
Hands down.
It wasn't the decapitation or any of that. It was they happened to kick something to knock out a screw or something for it to flip upside down. The rest of it was like,
who cares about how it happened?
For this.
Who cares about how it happened? It happened. It was excellent. It was kind of nice that they went that way instead of the pane of glass. In the original. 100%. Although the original was pretty phenomenal too, especially for its time period.
That
was a good decapitation.
But I do feel like this one was better.
The
That's my
decapitation was,
opinion.
yeah. But going back to like what you were saying about specifically to the like the jump scares, like Mark's right. Like this movie, you know, it's a very much a product of its time. Like not only is it a cash grab, not only is it a soulless remake, not only is it kind of continuing on that trend that was for some reason very popular at the early 2000s, but jump scares, I really feel like cheapen that. When you go back to the original film, I think the horror kind of just is like is allowed to just kind of breathe on its own. It's very excellent to like I would compare the horror of the original movie to something like Rosemary's Baby, which we've I think Adam brought up when we did Omen 2 a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
Specifically, like when you watch that movie, it feels like there are these like very subtle inklings that you're going to find out that like, oh hey, like this lady's like bringing the Antichrist into the world, and it doesn't like dawn on you like the revelation until like the last act. And I think that's really what made the first Omen so smart, was that it allowed the creepiness to just kind of be really subtle and kind of exist on its own, whereas this one was like, you know, we're audiences are kind of numb to the idea of stories like this now, so like we have to hit the jump scare and have to hit it to kind of continue.
If you or someone you know is listening to this podcast right now and you're struggling with suicide, addiction, self-harm, or depression, we encourage you guys to please reach out. This is the heartbeat of why we do what we do. Suicide is currently the 10th leading cause of death in the United States, and as of this recording, there are 132 suicides that take place each and every day on American soil. And when you scale back internationally, there are 800,000 successful suicides. That is one death roughly every 40 seconds. So if you or someone you know is struggling, you guys can go to victimsandvillains.net/hope. That resource is going to be right in the description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this. There you'll find resources that include the National Suicide Lifeline, which is 1-800-273-8255. You can also text HELP to 741-741. We also have a plethora of other resources, including churches, getting connected with counselors, LGBT resources like the Trevor Project, and also veteran hotline as well. Please, if you hear nothing else in the show, understand that you listening to this right now, have value and worth. We get it. Suicide, depression, mental health, these are hard topics, and the stigma around them doesn't make it any easier. But please consider the resources right in the descriptions below wherever you guys are listening, because once again, you have value and you have worth. So please stay with us.
I agree with what you're saying about the jump scares and about the first one being able to speak for itself just on pure horror. I'm 100%.
Well,
And it felt like they, like to Josh's point, everybody that has watched Omen, they had to like try to figure something out to up it, because everybody's seen the original and you're carbon copying a lot of it, but you were trying to put a little bit of things different. And I think that's why, part of me thinks that's why they threw that in.
Well,
for that reason.
They had done that Psycho remake a few years before this. It was like a scene for scene remake in almost every way. And I don't think it did super well. It wasn't until they did the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake that the horror remakes actually kicked off. And it was like, there is some sort of audience for this, more than just the diehards. So then they started trying to take that approach to other ones, and the Omen happened to be one of them. So they tried to follow that formula, because the original Chainsaw Massacre wasn't gory.
No.
You remember it as being gory, but it wasn't gory. So they tried to follow that same formula to bring it modern and make it a modern horror. And it didn't work with the way the original was.
See, yes, here's the thing about remakes is that you have to do it could be similar, like very similar structure, but there has to be something that's fresh, something that's new about it, something, even I would go as far as something to say something. I mean, this could have spun off as a commentary on, you know, the Catholic Church, you know, going back to originally, this is, you know, we talked about 9/11 being a few years after this. This is, I also think 3 or 4 years after the Boston Globe broke the story nationwide of the pedophilia ring within the church, going as high as the Vatican. Spotlight's a great movie if you haven't seen it, but I digress. One of the things that, you know, if you guys are watching this on Patreon, patreon.com/victims and villains, you guys can help us get mental health resources and education into concert venues, Comic-Cons, film festivals, etc. Link is in the description. But the reason I bring that up is because Billy has the video background of the Jackal and Julia Stiles. And that is kind of a more deliberate approach to how I feel like they try to modernize it, because in some ways this movie feels almost like an 80% like beat for beat from the original. Was that like a safe assumption to say?
Yeah, close.
580, yeah.
But like then they have these like other ideas and these other like visual cues that they try to do to kind of modernize it. And the reds and the whites and the jackals are like probably some of my favorite imagery within this, and it goes nowhere. Absolutely zero.
Yeah, I feel like they could have done a lot more with it. I mean, they were already showing like she had premonitions or whatever you want to call them, and I felt like they could have built off that a lot more than what they did.
Yeah.
But then you would have asked them to do something that made sense.
Like, I feel like it would have had so there's a scene in the third act of this movie where, again, it's a direct nod to the original. It's almost a beat for beat scene where Robert Thorne and the photographer go to the graveyard, and in the process of going to the graveyard, they find the original child that was supposed to be Robert's. And the reason that I bring that particular scene up is because the first grave that they unmark happens to be the quote unquote mother, and it's a jackal. And it's a greater emphasis on an earlier moment where they say like Robert recalls like someone telling him that like his son was like born of a jackal. That could have been such a great payoff to some of those visions that Julia Stiles goes through.
I mean, there was a lot of decisions they could have made, but they chose jump scares over quality.
Yeah, and it bothers me because like as a cinephile, like those sequences, like the dream sequences in this movie are freaking gorgeous. They're so stunning. They have the best cinematography out of the entire movie. They're visually appealing and they're kind of creepy. You could have done more.
Did they go into detail in the original with how to use the 7 daggers and how they all had to be used like they did in this one?
I'm pretty sure they did at one point. They said that they had to use a particular one first, and then the other ones had to be all used, but not necessarily, if I remember right, they didn't have to necessarily be used in a certain way. But that first one had to pierce the heart or something, I think it was.
Because they got fairly graphic with the description of how to use them in this one. That it had to be buried to the hilt, and then the rest had to be like raised off a cross or whatever.
I think that goes back to what we were talking about earlier with it being a product of its time, because when you look at the brutality of where we were in the 70s, especially to children, we really were at a different place where it was a lot more wholesome. And then you dig into this, and Texas Chainsaw is a great example. Moving from 74 to 2003, it's very bloody, it's very graphic, it's very gritty, it's very dirty, sweaty, and so it's a proven track record that audiences are able to handle a lot more grotesque details, and almost like we salivate for them. And I would argue that is this story being progressed to where it is part of the reason that we get the gruesome details that we get in that scene.
I think another scene that kind of was a product of his time was how they actually killed off Catherine, or Julia Stiles' character. And Catherine, in the original one, she goes flying like Superman out the window.
Mhm.
And this one is more subtle with air in the line.
Didn't she get like pitched out the window or something? In the original?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. In this one, they just put a needle into the IV or whatever and into the blood that's being transfused into her. I can't remember which one it was, but it's air in the line that kills her.
Yeah, which, man, that scene, and like, I feel like I have a pretty high tolerance for stuff like that. For some reason, that one just hit me. Just made me uncomfortable. I don't know why.
I kind of found it comical.
You would.
Because you've got her over there like, no. And then the old creepy lady nanny is like, yes. And
it'll be okay. It'll be okay. But
and then Damien outside staring down the guard, making him all freaked out, like, do I have like a booger out of my nose or something? The whole time it's going on. And he's like, I don't hear shit. And I found it kind of comical.
I mean, the comical part for me was when she was in the house doing the flowers, which in both movies, they're pregnant. They're going to be standing on like a table or something to water the flowers.
They're pregnant, but didn't want it.
Yeah, but still. And in this one, when she gets knocked over, she's like holding and screaming, Damien, oh, save me. And that part was comical to me just because the way it was done.
Well, it's like, so it's one of my biggest problems with this movie is the character contradiction. And like at that moment that you're talking about particular, she's already stated and established with the audience that she thinks Damien is evil. So like
evil.
It seems weird to make that comparison, but then like I think the thing that drove me the craziest out of every character decision in this movie was the moment where they're in the hotel room and Robert gets the news that Stiles is dead, and he like looks to the reporter guy and just says, he says Catherine's died, and I want Damien dead too. And then he like gets like the walk. He learns like about the daggers and everything, and the way to kill the Antichrist, and he changes his mind like overnight.
No, I was joking.
Completely like I like had to stop the movie, and I was like so furious. I was like, you gotta be shitting me. Come on.
I think the Omen, the original, had the advantage of being original instead of a remake. And it also came from a solid time in movies in general that had decent writing, and the settings fit the movies, and the movies fit the times, where it's not quite the same now.
There's a consistency thing that killed me. Mark, did you see Puppy in the first scene before she hung herself? It was Puppy versus the dogs that are usually in there. And when I say puppy, it's your puppy, a German Shepherd.
It was a black German Shepherd.
Versus, it's usually what, Rotties?
Well, there were rots in all of them. And
Right.
for the rest of the movie, it was just that one scene. It was a black Shepherd instead of a Rottweiler.
But to me, that killed it to me. It's always been Rotties.
I mean, this is dumb, but I feel like they should have always used Dobermans instead.
Yeah.
I'll give you that one.
I mean,
Not a German Shepherd.
well, okay, so German Shepherds, Rottweilers, Dobermans, and a couple other breeds through the years have had their time periods where they were considered super aggressive and destructive and stuff. Movies like this didn't help it. Movie portrayals like Cujo didn't help some of that stuff either. But I think I'm trying to remember. I think it was Rottweilers through parts of the 80s, Dobermans, then Shepherds, and now they're doing the same thing with pit bulls. Pit bulls are one of the
are in there now.
Yeah, pitties are the ones they're all after now. Even though test wise, they test like second for the best family dogs next to like golden retrievers. But yeah, I think, and they stuck with the Rottweiler through the series because that's what it was in the first one. But I really think a Doberman would have fit better because to me, it seems like it would look more like a hellhound than a Rottweiler would. But they're all terrifying when they're angry.
Yeah, agreed.
Yeah, sorry, detour.
No, I mean, please just keep giving me reasons to hate this movie.
Yeah, I don't know why they chose to do that in that specific scene compared to the original. Why not just have the Rottweiler the whole time instead of having one scene with a shepherd and then switching to the Rottweiler the rest of the time?
That was my point.
Yeah,
It broke consistency to me because it's
and
like
they didn't do that in the original. It was a Rottweiler for the whole movie and all the scenes. In this specific movie, for whatever reason, that specific scene, they went with a shepherd and then went with the Rottweiler the rest of the movie, which may be stupid, but it doesn't quite make sense.
To quote Tommy Wiseau from The Disaster Artist, continuity is in your forehead. It doesn't need to make sense. I will also say this, that like in regards to like animals specifically, like I guess like before I open this question up, let me ask you a prefix question first. Do either one of you guys believe in life after death?
I don't know.
That's fair.
I do.
Okay. So you can call me crazy if you would like to, but
Fucking crazy.
I haven't even said the statement yet.
Your name is
I am.
Mark. What's the difference?
I mean, I'm friends with you, so I got to be some sense of crazy.
Yeah, true.
One of the things that I believe in, life after death. I've of course I've established this in the series already, that I believe in the Antichrist and angels, demons, all of that stuff. One of the things that I think this movie does kind of well, and like also goes back to the original one, is like before Damien ever kind of gets his quote unquote, we'll call them groupies, the animals see them first. And I'm always under the impression that like animals can see stuff that like on other planes that we as humans can't see. And so I don't know if you guys believe that or like
100%.
That's kind of a common belief throughout multiple religions and all kinds of different things outside of religion too. So, yeah.
I mean, I'm of the belief that after a certain amount of coincidences, it's not a coincidence anymore. So.
Yeah. There'll be times where like I'll see like one of my cats like just like staring like at the wall and like something weird happens afterwards, and I'm just kind of like, oh, cool. This must be like my ghost.
But
this is
cats
fine.
are weird anyways.
I mean, your dog's also weird, so
no, my dog is dumb. There's a difference.
I can vouch that his dog's dumb.
But he is a good boy, and he's made appearances on the show too.
You notice that Mark has switched to he's a good boy and all after the conversation we had a few minutes ago. He's scared of the dog. That's what it is.
I'm not scared of my dog. He's a good boy. He's a dumb good boy.
Do you guys how do you guys think that the one of the other things that I think this film does makes it like an interesting decision is like so from 19 what's the original one, like 1976, right? Maybe
78, 76.
So
Somewhere in there.
78 to 2006. In between that time, you had a lot of Bible scholars that have studied and interpreted scripture, and maybe it wasn't the original one. I just missed it, but I love the fact that they're fixated in this movie on the revelation like passage of like Damien being the Antichrist, and like that they make a point in this one to say that the seed that he will arise from is actually believed to be politics, which I thought was interesting because I don't really
the original too.
Did they make that same exact one?
Yeah.
They did make that
Yeah.
reference in the original.
Okay,
Yeah.
I thought that was cool. I liked it.
And from the Roman Empire, meaning he could also have just been taught in the Roman Empire instead of being born in the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
So they were talking in the original about sending him to some school in Rome. And I think they talked about that in this one too. But there's also the belief that USA might be the modern day Rome. So you could have that in there as well. Because you do have him walking off with the president at the end of the movie. But yeah.
Man, that was so dumb. do you think that they made this movie with the intention of being like, we're gonna keep it open for a sequel? I honestly was like hoping that like Damien was gonna die at the end of this one, that was gonna be like the gut punch that like separated this one from the original one.
I think like with the fourth one, they did you can copy my homework, but don't make it obvious kind of thing.
Mhm.
But they were allowed to make it a little more obvious because it's a remake, so they could steal a lot of that, but change just enough things to modernize it. And it didn't work.
It didn't work. And
No.
like maybe it's just like the general audience consensus that you don't want to see a child die on screen, because like I mean Dr. Sleep got a lot of backlash for the baseball scene.
I
A
don't
lot
remember
of
the baseball scene.
it's the scene where the cannibals like eat the baseball kid.
I just don't remember it. It must not have stood out very much for me.
But a lot of people kind of look to that scene and like say it's like talk about like specifically how uncomfortable it is because it's a child. And I'm kind of curious if like, if that's kind of the same idea with this one, I don't know. Would you guys have liked to see Damien die in the end?
I wouldn't have minded, but part of me feels like they left it open as in, let's see if this does good so we can do a money grab and do some more. But that's just me.
I feel like we're going to see in a couple years another remake of the original Omen with plans to do sequels because of how they're doing the remakes and sequels and crap that they're doing now. Seem to be the big thing, taking old school series and either doing a modern take on it or doing a new sequel on it, like they did with Top Gun, like they did with The Exorcist and all these other movies they're doing sequels with now that have been kind of stagnant for years or decades.
But I think they did pretty good with Top Gun myself, to be honest.
They did.
Good with Top Gun.
Okay. I'm like,
I mean,
they did good with that. I'd be scared for them to do a third
I mean,
remake or another remake, do a third version.
In all fairness, though, the Top Gun remake also had Jennifer Connelly. So I'd watch just about anything with her in it.
Yeah, I mean,
he's like, I don't know where to go from here.
So
yeah, Billy, take us away.
how about the priest when they went to visit him in the monastery years later when they're going to talk to him? Why did he look like Palpatine?
Because he was burnt and they didn't.
I realized
they didn't do as much. They didn't have the ability to do as much with makeup in the 70s as they did when they did the remake.
But the hilarious part is one of my boys walked in and said, "Is that like a Jedi standing next to him?"
It was
And he wasn't watching the movie with me.
it was Snoke. It wasn't Palpatine.
Yeah.
Either way, it's just it gave the Star Wars kind of feel to me.
I feel like you can say whatever you want to about that sequence. That is I'm not gonna I keep saying one of the best things. It is one of the better things about this movie. I really liked that character design. Even though you only see it, it's very haunting, it's very chilling, but it works really well.
How would you guys like to help us get mental health resources into schools, conventions, and other events? Well, now you can. Simply go to patreon.com/victims and villains for as little as $1 a month. You guys can help us get mental health resources into current and upcoming generations, educate and break down stigma surrounding mental health, suicide, and depression. And you get exclusive content that you can't get anywhere else. And you guys can tell us which Nicolas Cage movie you want us to cover, and we'll do it. All it takes to get started is to go to patreon.com/victims and villains, or simply click the link in the episode description wherever you guys are currently listening or streaming this episode. Pick your tier and get started today. Yes, it's that simple. So quickly select the tier that you want and help us get hope into the hands of the depressed and the suicidal today.
I mean, it was kind of an improvement over the original scene, and that I think that just had more to do with the quality of the makeup and prosthetics that they have now compared to then. Because even as good as the prosthetics and makeup and everything was for the Thing, you could still tell where this looked a little bit more skinish, kind of like the engineers in Prometheus and their prosthetic skins and everything looked more realistic than they probably would have looked like if they had tried to show one in the 78 Alien.
Yeah.
Yeah, agree.
Just because of the quality of the products and the time period.
This is true. Yeah. I've been going through the Planet of the Apes movies in myself, and like just watching like the original like 60s and just the progression of like how the technology has been able to improve.
Apes.
Yeah, how it's been able to improve from like even, from 68 all the way to 2001. Now we do motion capture, but I think that also kind of leans into something that we've progressed the art of practical effects really well, to where you're able to kind of have that really dope scene. Honestly, I don't think either one of you have seen it, but it reminded me of one of the scenes in Terrifier 2, the design of it.
I haven't seen it yet.
I haven't seen it yet. I need to.
Have you seen the first one?
Gotta watch it.
Should probably watch both of them.
Yeah, pretty much. But he brought up the apes and all. I really like how they handled this one versus the original, honestly. Because the original, they had them in the car, just the two of them and everything. Where this one, it was this whole class sitting there. They're breaking the glass. I don't know what y'all thought about that, but I kind of like this one versus, the original 70s version.
Wait, what scene are we talking about?
Where they're at the zoo and the monkeys and the apes are breaking the glass.
Yeah. Somehow I missed that transition.
I picked up off him talking about Planet of the Apes, man. Chill.
Yeah.
Dang.
That's a great segue, Billy. I liked that scene.
It was so good I didn't even catch it.
that particular scene was like what got me thinking, particularly about the like animals being able to like sense and understand things like that are otherworldly or like outside of what we see.
Kind of reminded me more of the zoo scene in the first Harry Potter movie. That's what I thought about.
All right, Mr. Slytherin.
What's your point?
Yeah, what's your point? You're probably a Hufflepuff, my guy.
How'd you know?
So there's one other scene in particular. My wife's a Hufflepuff. That's how I know. There's one scene in particular that I don't know if it bothered you guys, but the scene where like somebody gets it's early on in the movie, but it's like somebody gets attacked by the dog, and it just seems like the ADR for the dog is like way off. Did you guys catch that?
The what?
The ADR, which is the practice of adding like voiceover to improve the sound quality of the film after production wraps.
I didn't catch that, but
it's very bad.
I mean,
It was so bad I probably ignored it.
That's true.
Honestly, it was probably so bad that I'm like, okay, yeah, whatever.
That's a possibility.
All right, so gentlemen, if we updated our rankings from the last episode, where does this one land for you guys in the top 5?
1, 3, remake, 4, 2.
Wow, you liked the second one over the fourth one, or over the fourth one over the second one?
Yeah. Okay. Just because of how comedic it was with some of the dumb shit they did.
That's fair. I feel like that the fourth one makes me feel like, Grandpa Simpson yelling at clouds with some of the choices that they make. I will go 1, 3, remake, 2, 4.
Yeah, I'm flipping between the last two. They were equally as bad. So if I had to, I would probably be with Josh on that 2, 4. Because 4, like I said last time, it's just problem child trying to be a horror movie or a horror. Seriously,
that was called The Good Son.
Yeah,
and that had
that one too. Hey,
93.
I like The Good Son. There was nothing wrong with that.
That movie came out, and I had relatives telling my parents to not ever let me see that movie.
Weren't you the star?
I mean, I could have been.
Anyways, anything else you guys thinking about? Do you guys want to add to this movie? Beating a dead horse at this point.
I was going to say, I think we've hit everything on this movie.
The good, the bad, and the ugly.
So one last thing. What's his name? Liev Schreiber and
Schreiber.
Yeah,
Julia Stiles.
And Julia Stiles. Is it me, or do they have the habit of a lot of actors and just play every role the same?
See,
like Keanu Reeves does the same thing, but they've started putting him in roles that it fits.
See, I would say yes for Julia Stiles, because I also felt the same way watching her in Orphan 2. I don't feel the same about Liev Schreiber in here. I think he has the potential to be fantastic. I think that he was just given really shitty material here. For 1, for 2, I would also say that the two of them just didn't have chemistry.
Yeah, you could see that.
It was terrible.
Yeah.
It felt like it was forced the whole time. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. Liev Schreiber, it depends on like who you have in terms of like the roles, because like he's really good in Scream. He was fantastic in Spotlight. He's really good in Ray Donovan, but then he's like also like really, really crappy in this movie, and he's kind of okay as Sabretooth. So, anyways, we're one step closer to finishing the Omen. We'll be back next week to talk about the first Omen. But gentlemen, where can people find you on the meantime?
As usual, just hanging out here and not posting anything on Instagram.
Yeah, so search Abyss Casing wherever you guys get your podcasts from.
And of course, you can find me WTaber3 on Facebook.
So you guys can find me. I am on Captain Nostalgia at on Letterboxd. I just want to thank everyone who came out this past weekend for Horrific Hope Film Festival. Once again, thank you to this year's sponsors: Fierce Literature, Coven Salon, Worlds Away Escape, Raven Contour, and 10 Top Art. You guys can catch all of those in the show notes below, along with our mental health resource library as well. As I mentioned, you guys can catch us wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Search Abyss Gazing, and you guys can find our parent company, Victims and Villains. We are on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Patreon, and wherever you guys get your podcasts from. Until next time, remember, the longer you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back into you.